Are you a good listener? Are you the person that people turn to with their deepest, darkest secrets when they don't trust anyone else with them? Are you the person that people know they're safe to tell anything to because they know that you won't judge them, but will try to be understanding and supportive, maybe even help them? Take a moment to ask yourself whether you really are a good listener. Are you? Or do you find yourself sometimes checking out when people are talking to you, or mostly waiting for an opening to interject and state your opinion? If you're a good listener, you're a true witness, the face of God, an example of Christ on earth. If not, it's okay. You can figure it out right now, today. Why not? And start to change. So let's explore today what we can do to be more Christ-like in this regard, to become better listeners. I recently read a post on Instagram. It said, when someone makes you feel safe, safe to express, safe to feel, safe to speak, just safe. I love that. I love an emotionally validating human. I love an active listener. Can you think of someone in your life who makes you feel safe like that? Consider for a moment why they make you feel safe. Is it in part because they're a good listener? I know personally that throughout my life, the people who've been the best examples of God's love for me are those that I felt safe to talk to, regardless of how dark things felt or how bad of a place I seemed to be in or how embarrassed I was at the situation I'd gotten myself in. And I knew I could confess anything to that person, and they would hold my secrets for me, never tell another soul, and be empathetic and understanding. I also knew that they would abide with me in that place patiently until I was ready to come out of it, and wait to offer a hand up or advice until I was actually ready for it. Those people were my lifeline at that time. And the unfortunate thing is I can count on one hand or maybe two the number of people I'd put in that category. And some of the people I initially trusted with my innermost feelings and thoughts and the messiest situations eventually proved incapable of holding secrets in confidence or abiding with me patiently. And that I do not say to shame them at all. In fact, they were among the only ones, or maybe the only one at the time I could turn to. And like I said, they, in some cases, saved me by just listening and being with me. And I tell you that only because it demonstrates just how difficult it is to be a really good listener consistently, and how rare good listeners are, and how important. But the thing about being a good listener is this: it isn't just about good listening, which obviously requires a lot more than hearing people. Good listening is actually the culmination and natural result of embodying so many qualities of the Christ that that person just becomes a good listener by extension organically. You know, good listeners are slow to judge. They're humble, they're empathetic, they're understanding, patient, loving, kind, trustworthy, compassionate, and impersonal. They don't need the other person to match their moral standards or spiritual attainment. They don't get uncomfortable if that person isn't aligned with their beliefs or values. They can listen to unholy stories and thoughts without needing to immediately correct them. None of that is easy. None of it. I recently had a good friend tell me that she had stopped talking to me because there was something I told her she didn't feel comfortable talking about. It took her months to tell me that that's why she had dropped off in our communications and wasn't texting back or calling. And not only did it sting when she told me that, but it also made me feel like I don't know if I can talk to her about things anymore. I don't know what I can and can't say. So unfortunately, I can't really consider her someone I can confide in any longer. And that's unfortunate. Would you rather be the person who can listen to anything and continue to be there for that person, or the person people stop telling things to because they can't trust you with their secrets. Well, good listeners are attentive and inquisitive. They hear what's being said as well as what's unsaid. They read the emotions behind what's being said through body language and facial expressions, and they don't always take the words at face value. How often have we heard somebody say, I'm okay, and they say it with their mouth, but inside, it's a different story. Their eyes tell a different story. Well, good listeners hear the story and the pain behind the eyes and brush away the words gently until the other person feels safe enough to be honest about what's really going on, what they're really feeling. Good listeners also don't jump into problem solving and try to immediately fix the situation or get rid of unwanted feelings. This is something I know personally I really have to work on myself. I come from a family of problem solvers, and we're always looking for ways to quickly solve anything that people express that's negative. And so one of my creative problem solving ends up being one of my go-to responses as a result. And it's not always helpful. It can make people feel that I am rushing them, or like I'm not okay with where they're at, or that I'm not giving them the space to express their feelings or find their way or get their footing or be where they are, discover their own path forward. And so that's something I'm personally working on. And finally, good listeners hold things in confidence and never tell another soul what they know without permission. I recently met up with one of my best friends and his new wife. We are at brunch, and I started talking about something personal. I, of course, assumed his wife knew about it since they're married, and I had told him. But it became immediately clear when I started talking that she had no idea what was going on or what I was talking about, and he had not told his wife anything about what I had mentioned. So when she went to the bathroom, I said, "Hey, does your wife know about all the thing we're talking about?" And he said, "No, of course not. I would never share that with her without your permission. You told me that in confidence. I wouldn't share that with anyone, not even his wife." I was really impressed by him at that moment. I thought, that is a good listener. As the listening angel says in volume 32, number 50, good listeners always know a lot and seldom tell. And James 1:19 says, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. When we listen, we're being like Jesus. Jesus was a listener. He listened to the woman he met at the well in John 4. He listened to the two men he encountered on the road to Emmaus in Luke 24. He listened to the woman he healed in Luke 8. And one of my favorite stories is of him listening in Mark 10, where Jesus is trying to leave the city of Jericho. And as he does that, he's being followed by this huge crowd. But the story isn't about the crowd. It's about a man who wasn't in the crowd, a man who was blind named Bartimaeus. And as the crowd passed, he called out to Jesus. The crowd yelled at him, tried to silence him. But Jesus heard Bartimaeus over the noisy crowd and called him over. He said, what do you want me to do for you? Why did Jesus ask that? Didn't he know the answer already? Couldn't he see that Bartimaeus was blind? Of course he could. Jesus was doing something for Bartimaeus that no one had done in a very long time. He was listening to him. He was demonstrating that Bartimaeus is valued, worthy, accepted, and loved. Everyone has a story to tell, even Bartimaeus. And when we don't listen to that story, we communicate to the storyteller that they're alone, worthless, insignificant, rejected, unloved. When we do listen to their story, however, we communicate to them that they're loved and worthy and known and significant. When we listen, we communicate the gospel. As I was doing research for today, I read a blog post in which a woman was struggling to listen to someone without judging them. She wrote, I had lunch with a man and I was going to baptize, and he invited his friend from AA to join us. She slid into the booth and politely listened to our conversation about what God had been doing in his life. At some point, the conversation turned to prayer. She spoke up and said that she also prayed to Jesus, but she believed that, quote, all of them heard her. Puzzled, I asked for clarification. Who are all of them? She then said that she believed all major world religions' gods were up there listening to her prayers, and whichever one could help would answer her prayer. I said nothing. My mind raced with different rebuttals to her statement about prayer and apologetic defenses for the supremacy of Christ. And then our mutual friend asked her directly, "Do you think Jesus is God?" And she paused for a moment, looked at the tiles in the ceiling, and before turning to him and saying, "I think he could be." Well, the author of this blog was so impressed in that moment by how her friend handled the situation that she set out to be able to listen like that without getting defensive or needing to immediately insert her beliefs into the situation. When someone feels listened to, they feel loved and understood. Their feelings are validated, and they're often able to get a deeper understanding of who they are, and we show them the face of God rather than needing to tell them about God. Jesus knew the best way to minister to people is by listening. In order to listen like Jesus, we must listen to people patiently before making judgments or assumptions, and we must remain open-minded and acknowledge that we may not know everything. A dictation by our very own beloved Jesus Christ in volume 37, number 45 says it best. Search your souls. If you do not have a transcendent love for all people that comes from seeking and finding me in the fruitful flame of their hearts, then you may yet retain insidious prejudices, because you behold the outer man and not the inner man of the heart. You can be certain that you are rid of your prejudices only if you systematically go through your vocabulary and your attitudes, only if you sift your thoughts, including your superiority and inferiority complexes. Yes, where do you position yourself? And do you judge others from that position? Do you define your identity in society by your membership in this exclusive group or that exclusive group? There is pride, even spiritual pride, in some who have the teachings of the ascended masters and therefore feel that they're better than others. This is most unfortunate, for hearts of gold are everywhere in the earth, and they are where you would least expect to find them. I ask you this day to take a score pad and to recall the kindnesses and unkindnesses you have extended towards others. Note the incidents and put 2 check marks for each kindness and 1 check mark for each unkindness. In this way, you can periodically review the quality of your interchanges with others. This is important. Know then, beloved, that to be a good shepherd is to give the word of kindness and compassion again and again. Whether you journey to lower levels of the astral plane with Archangel Michael or to the highest levels of the etheric plane, remember to give kindness to all. For you never know when those who have strayed far from the center of being under the influence of black magicians and fallen angels will melt by the tenderness of your heart that says, no matter how filthy or dark this one has become, or how great his wrongs have been, I will give the word of kindness. I ask you not to forsake any who are sent to you, any who come your way, any who knock at your door begging for the bread of life. I ask you to remember that in the ups and downs of the sine wave of your many lifetimes, you have been prince and pauper, priest and philosopher king, sultan and slave. There is scarcely a role to be played in human life that you yourselves have not acted out. Some of you have gone astray from your spiritually ordained path for several lifetimes, and then with hearts contrite, you've returned again to the altar of the great white brotherhood. So, beloved, we have all had our dark moments, and we have all had our light moments. So beautiful, isn't it? So let us be that light in the dark moments for those suffering by being good listeners, which is an act of kindness. Doing so can be the difference between reinforcing someone's inherent God value or their deep-seated feelings of shame and worthlessness. In general, people feel listened to, feel appreciated and valued, respected, loved, accepted, validated, worthy, significant, and known, which reinforces their God reality. People who are not listened to feel disrespected, ignored, cast out, unworthy, alone, worthless, invisible, insignificant, unloved, and rejected. Let's not add to that. Proverbs 18:2, which we heard earlier, says, "Fools have no interest in understanding. They only want to air their own opinions." And Proverbs 18:13 says, "If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame." This shows us that pride and arrogance are the enemies of good listening. If we assume we know everything about the speaker, both as the person and the situation, we stop listening and start believing that we can anticipate what someone's going to say. That can lead us to formulate a response while the other person is still talking, or sometimes even finish that person's sentence. Interruptions and impatience are clear indicators of pride. And an impatient listener is not able to fully engage in the present or be fully present for someone. Sadly, social media has encouraged us to do this, to push our opinion on others without listening first, often in a confrontational way, making snap decisions about stereotypes and offering comments intended to incite anger. I read this on a blog. When it comes to enemies, we don't think twice. Our response is emotional and reflexive. If it comes from them, we're against it. Whatever it is they're saying, it's wrong. Whatever they want is bad. Whatever they're doing must be stopped. Doesn't that kind of sum up today's political climate and the temperature on social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram? Yeah, I read this on another blog. We carry this attitude forward to our nation's formal opponents, as well as to rivals at work, political adversaries, neighbors who bug us, and family members who press our buttons. Nothing these people can be up to, or nothing these people are up to, can be good. And it would help if they would just disappear. Ugh. There's nothing in the Bible where Jesus wished someone would just disappear. And he encountered a lot of ugliness in the world and a lot of not so awesome people, but he never demeaned anyone. He never interrupted them before they could finish speaking. He never called them names. It wasn't his style. That was not the example he set. It was important for Jesus to understand what his hearers were thinking so that he could meet them where they were. And he never forced anyone to believe his words. He invited them to and was gracious in his welcoming arms. He often asked people questions, another sign of someone who's truly listening. So let us be humble like him, putting ourselves aside in order to fully understand the views of others. Let us be the one who reinforces their inherent value by being their confidant. Have you ever been someone's confidant? Or have you ever lost a confidant? Who was it? Take a moment now to consider why you trusted them or why they trusted you. What was it about that dynamic that made you feel safe or unsafe, or made them feel safe? I did some research on what makes someone an ideal confidant, and here's what I found. A confidant is an active listener, someone who doesn't offer advice unless you ask for it or make the conversation about themselves or their issues. They're self-aware and empathetic. someone who can feel what you're feeling, either because they've experienced it and they've been there themselves, or because they're just tuned in and able to tap into how you're feeling. Somebody who's trustworthy. They have the integrity to keep your conversations between the two of you. Non-judgmental. They don't assign blame when hearing your stories, and instead they are capable of understanding we're all human and we all make mistakes. Authentic. Someone who allows their own emotions and vulnerabilities to show through without any pretense. Calm. A rock who isn't prone to emotional or dramatic outbursts and can listen impersonally. Perceptive. Someone who can see the forest for the trees when you're too emotional to and you're lost in the weeds. Patient. Someone who can listen for hours at a time or can offer their time without the need to constantly interject their opinion or thoughts. Optimistic. They have an uplifting outlook on life and give you the strength to keep going. Here are some tips for being a good listener. Ask open-ended questions. Those allow someone to explain themselves and reveal any details at a level at which they're comfortable. So you can ask questions like, what's troubling you? Or how do you feel about fill in the blank? Or how did it make you feel when XYZ happened? Those kinds of questions can't be answered with a simple yes or no. They have to be thought through, and they let the person know that you're really willing to listen to the details and not expecting some kind of a simple response. Observing body language and tone of voice. That can help you gauge if someone's feeling really anxious or uncomfortable or ashamed. Some common signs: if someone's nervous or turning away while speaking, or looking down, or physically closing themselves off, like crossing their arms. Other signs could be that they're talking quickly or in a higher pitch than usual, so you know they're in a fight or flight response. Another tip is to be patient. Confiding in someone takes time and trust, and so wait to build a relationship where both parties can feel comfortable taking part in the conversation. Never pry for more information. Just listen to what's being shared. Understanding and respecting someone's boundaries and what they're willing to share also helps to ensure that the person confiding in you feels more comfortable. Don't offer advice unless it's being asked for, which is what I'm working on. Most people just want to be heard, not necessarily told what they should do next. And unsolicited advice is rarely followed. And given that a confidant may not know all the details of a situation being shared, it can even backfire. This isn't to say, of course, that advice is always a bad thing. It can definitely be helpful. It's just simply realizing that sometimes having a friend listen to them may be all that friend really wants, and they might not be ready yet for your advice. They might not be asking for it just yet. But if you listen and you're patient with them, you'll know when that moment arrives. Jesus was so skilled at drawing other people out. He would communicate empathy by doing that. He never merely listened to words. He listened for attitudes and that whole range of emotions. He listened in a way that communicated compassion and care, taking the time to understand others with his entire being. He was willing to take time to understand another person's perspective. He appreciated learning about other people's concerns and values and their spiritual condition. He knew how to ask informative questions that allowed him to find out what was really important to that person. He listened to people with his eyes, his ears, his whole mind, his whole heart, his whole being. And he took time to show people how important they were to him by giving them his undivided attention. He listened to people's emotions, ideas, and implications. He listened in a way that helped him identify a person's need. And he listened not only for the words, but for the sense of urgency and the tone of people's voices. He was willing to put away negative feelings or grudges or hurts or misunderstandings to really hear what people were saying. And he was willing to listen without interrupting. He asked questions to direct people toward the essential problems in their life was able to quickly discern the differences between what was essential and non-essential information. And Jesus certainly never listened to people to find something to criticize or hold over their head or use against them. Never. He listened to show them God's love. Would you join me now in asking our beloved Jesus to come show us how we can be better listeners so we can be God's love in action on earth? Beloved Jesus Christ, thank you so much for this teaching today and for being the example that you set in the earth of being a good listener, listening not only to our Heavenly Father, but also listening to others patiently in a way that demonstrated to them God's love for them, that showed them He was listening because you are listening. We ask that you overshadow us now as we go forward in this day and show us the places and spaces where we could stand to be more like you so that we can rise up and follow in the big footsteps that you set of that wonderful example and be God's love on earth. We ask for this to be done according to God's holy will. Let it be done. Amen.